There's an automatic connection and identification with each other instead of a ghettoization, right? You're over there, we're over here, we have joy and hope, you have grief and anguish, right? It's not what the church is saying. It's a fundamental change in the way the church engages the modern world. And going forward from this place, both in the text and in time, right, with Blessed John Paul II being then elected Pope and Cardinal Ratzinger then being elected Pope Benedict, the document and then these men who are its interpreters in a very real and universal way provide the formulae for navigating through the grief and anguish of our times that will allow us to reach the joy and hope that God intends for us. So, a couple of quotes from this book chapter reveal what has been lost and how we recover it. This is his commentary again in this chapter that we highly recommend. The real content of Christianity is not the discussion of its Christian content and ways of realizing it. The real content of Christianity is not the dogmas in a vacuum. The content of Christianity is the community of the Word, sacrament, and love of neighbor. Formed by the doctrines and informed by the doctrines, absolutely. But this is where Christianity takes on flesh. We are an incarnate religion. Not just that we worship the Word made flesh, but that we bring that flesh to love of neighbor, to which justice and truth bear a fundamental relationship. If I'm not acting justly or in truth, none of this is going to happen. I'm not going to have a community of the Word and a sacrament and love of neighbor. And conversely, if I don't have this community and sacrament and love of neighbor, I'm not going to be able to act justly and in truth. This is a symbiotic relationship, and this is what Cardinal Ratzinger was saying. To recover what has been lost. And then finally, whether or not the council, and this Andrew's already quoted from this, what's going to make the council a success? When we look back 500 years from now, just as we look back at the Council of Trent or Thomas Aquinas' scholastic theology, what makes us check the box success? Right? Here's what he says. Whether it becomes a positive force is not about the texts and organizations. Only indirectly is it about the texts and the ministries that come out of it. The crucial question is whether there are people who are driven to holiness and are ready to effect something new and living. It's about it taking root in here and then being made flesh in the world. There have to be individuals prepared to experience in themselves the drama of separation of the wheat from the copper. Right? We have to be made ready to say, yeah, there's going to be a process of purification, and it may be painful, but it's the drive to holiness that's going to make me say, I'm willing to walk through that, not for my glory, but not even ultimately for the glory of this thing we call the church, but for the salvation of all mankind. Okay? I highly recommend this chapter, heartily, as Andrew did. Okay? Just for the last few minutes, what I'm going to do is go through the structure of the document itself, in case you're not all that familiar with it. And let me just say this about sources. I have made available and connected certain other readings to every week that we're gathering. Okay, and I read them, but I love to read. I'm a Catholic geek. I can't imagine not reading a whole bunch. So I read them, and they are edifying. And I've chosen them very specifically because they relate to very specific things in the documents that I think you would all be edified by reading. That being said, I know you all have families and jobs, and maybe you're just not a reader, okay? That's fine. the things that I've assigned, or not assigned, but the things that I've associated with this are highly encouraged. They're not required. You'll get something out of this without reading, but you'll get more out of it if you do the readings associated with it. But if there's anything that you can read, if you've got kind of a limited amount of time and you've got a hierarchy kind of in your head of what you ought to read, the first things I would say to read is the document itself. If that's all you can get to in a given week, that's fine. You'll get plenty out of the documents. And then after that, if you can get to the other things that I've recommended, that's even better, because we'll engage in discussion based on those things. So I'll say that about the sources. The document, particularly that I'm working from, is in this big compilation, but it's the Gaudium et Spes text is readily available online. Again, you can Google Gaudium et Spes. The first one that comes up is the Vatican website, and you can be able to print it off. Those of you who have, I see Brian looking at Verbum, it's on Verbum, readily available. So that's what I'm working from. So the structure of the document itself. There's an introduction that's 10 paragraphs. And when I say paragraphs, it's actually, in each paragraph there are subparagraphs. So it's about, I don't know, in my copy, we're talking about 8 pages, 9 pages, okay? Followed by 2 parts. The ensuing 35 paragraphs are giving general principles related to man specifically, right? We're talking about a summa of Christian anthropology, so it's general principles about man, his hopes, his anguishes, his questions, his sinful condition, and what's the perfect revelation of man. We talked about paragraph 22, that's our interpretive key, that man is fully revealed to himself in Christ. So those are general principles, and it takes a lot of lofty thought to kind of get through those, and so I'm going to try to bring it to a practical level, but I don't want to lose the grandeur because it's beautiful. And then following that, there are roughly another 45 to 50 paragraphs about the applications of these general principles to particular scenarios, beginning with marriage and the family, and culture, and economics, and politics, and international relations, right? And we'll walk through those. All of these, actually, there's a couple of paragraphs on this section that we'll deal with right after the first of the year, but then the entire second half of this process is devoted to part 2, where we take the principles that we've discussed, and we see how they take on flesh in the various settings that we're all dealing with in our lives, right? Marriage and family, and economics and politics. So here's there are, I think, 3 primary categories into which the teachings of the document can be grouped. And really, I'm taking this from paragraph 11. This document deals with anthropology. Who is man? What is man? What's his definition? What are his needs? What are his problems? Right? That's anthropology. Then, man's edification. How do we build up man? Shedding new light on the world. How do we guide man's mind? How do we assess the values of the modern world? And how do we construct right order so that man can be built up, so that man can be edified and can be healthy, right, as he's intended to be. And then finally, the third category is teleology, from the Latin word telos, that means end, right, the end. What is God's purpose for man? What is his full ideal? And what's the divine source of his life, of man's life? So these are the 3, again and again, you'll see these pop up in every section of the document. Who is man? How do we build him up? And what's he going toward? Okay? Does this make sense? Okay. So think again of these in the context of